Chapter 10. A Storm at Sea. It was now Friday, the 21st of August. We had traveled more than 800 miles on the sea, and I calculated our position to be exactly under England. The sea was calm, and the fresh wind was moving us along. Yet something was different. The clouds, if that is what they could be called, were breaking up into what looked like huge balls of cotton and were falling towards the sea, becoming darker as they fell. "I think we're in for some sort of storm," I told my uncle. He pointed up at the sky, but said nothing. It soon became obvious that there was much electricity in the air. My hair started to stand on end, and I think that if one of my companions had touched me, he would have received a terrible shock. At 10 o'clock, the signs of a storm became even clearer. The clouds were black, and the wind seemed to die down as if getting ready for a battle. The raft sat motionless on the dark sea. "We should lower the sails," I said. "No, no," my voice said angrily. "Let the wind strike us and sweep us away. Perhaps it will finally carry us to the other side of this endless water." Suddenly, the storm hit. It came from all corners of the cavern at once, howling, shrieking, and raging. The darkness increased. The raft rose and fell with the storm, bounding over the waves. My uncle was thrown headlong upon the deck, where he lay quietly. His eyes were open, and he seemed to be enjoying the storm as he held on for his life. I went to him, crawling so I would not be tossed overboard into the raging water. As for Hans, he never moved a muscle. His long hair was blowing wildly in the storm, but he just sat in place. We were moving at an unbelievable speed before the wind, heading for a curtain of rain. "Lower the sail!" I yelled, using my hand to make a megaphone so that I could be heard above the roaring of the storm. "No!" my uncle yelled back. "Let it alone!" The sea began to foam wildly. Fearful claps of thunder were accompanied by the brightest lightning I had ever seen. The flashes crashed one another, hurled from every side. Hailstones then shone like lamps. Hailstones that shone like lamps struck the raft, threatening to overturn us. My eyes were blinded by the bright flashes in the dark sky. My ears were deafened by the roar of the thunderclaps, which were so loud that it seemed as if all the gunpowder in the world had exploded at that same instant. The storm did not lessen for even an instant all day and all night, and Sunday, the 23rd, found us still under attack by the elements. It was Monday, the 24th, and the storm continued as if it had just begun. My uncle and I were broken and tired, but Hans seemed as fresh and alert as the day we had begun our journey, almost 2 months before. About 12 o'clock, the storm became worse, and we were forced to tie down all of our cargo to the deck of the raft, or else it would have been washed overboard. At times, the entire raft was under water, and my uncle and I had to tie ourselves to the mast. I took out my notebook and wrote for my uncle to see. "Take in sail." He shook his head. Yes, but it was too late. A ball of fire swept over the raft and carried the mast and sail into the sky like a kite. We were frozen, actually shivering with terror. The ball of fire, half white, half red, moved along, first heading away from our raft and then towards it, until finally it landed on our powder barrel. We knew that an explosion would soon come. But it did not. The fireball moved again, approaching Hans, then my uncle, then me. Gases coming from it choked us. Suddenly, the ball of fire burst, producing such great electricity that it blinded us all for the moment. Then it went out, and darkness once more fell upon the water. We continued to move rapidly, even though we no longer had a sail. I made some quick calculations. We must have gone under England, the Channel, France, and much of Europe by this time. Suddenly, there was another great noise, the noise of the sea breaking upon a rocky shore. The waves tossed our small craft onto the shore with such force that the raft was wrecked. I would have died on it had it not been for Hans, who carried my broken and bruised body out of the boiling surf and over the slippery rocks that marked the shore. Our ocean voyage had ended, and I was glad to see the end of the Central Sea. Hans took my uncle and me and the goods he had managed to save from the wrecked raft to a shelter under a rocky overhang. He prepared some food, but after the last 3 days, all I wanted to do was sleep. The next day when I awoke, the weather was once again beautiful. Every trace of the storm had disappeared. "Well, my boy," said my uncle cheerfully, "have you slept soundly?" "Yes," I replied. "And have we now reached the end of our journey?" My uncle seemed surprised. "Of course not," he said. "We can now continue on our journey by land to the center of the earth." "And how will we get back?" I asked. "Simple," he said with a smile. "When we reach the exact center of the earth, we will simply find a new way back up to the surface, or we will follow the way we came." "And what do we do for provisions?" "Hans has taken care of that," he said. "He has saved much from the raft, and he will see to it that we find whatever we need along the way. Have you any doubts that he can do what I say?" I had to admit that Hans could do whatever he set out to do. We went to the rocky overhang where Hans had laid out the supplies and provisions he had rescued. We had a 4-month supply of biscuits, dried fish, and salted meat, plenty of water, and most of our instruments. Only our guns were lost. "And the raft?" I asked. "I don't think we'll need it again," said my uncle. "I have an idea that we shall not come out through the same opening by which we entered." Was my uncle mad? Little did I know how true his words would prove to be. "Where do you think we are now in relation to the upper world?" I asked my uncle. "It is hard to tell exactly, but I calculate that we have traveled about 900 miles upon the sea," he said. "We are about 2,700 miles from Sneffels. That would put us exactly under the Mediterranean Sea." My uncle took out his compass, as if to prove what he had said. He looked at the needle, and his face went white. "What's the matter?" I asked. He could not speak. He closed his eyes, rubbed them, then looked at the needle again. I took the compass from him and examined it. The needle pointed due north, and the direction we thought was south. There was only one conclusion to be drawn. During the storm, the wind had reversed itself, and the shore on which we now stood was the same one we had left so many days before.